often associated with glitzy nightlife, shimmering casinos, and fast-paced entertainment, Nevada is a state like no other. But away from the neon and glamour lie the historic landmarks, hotels, saloons, and diverse rugged landscapes that hold terrifying secrets of their own. Dark and disturbing tales of ghosts, triumph, and tragedy permeate the quiet streets of former boom towns and rural communities. Much of the paranormal energy of this state links to its mining history, which brought out the best and worst in those from all walks of life, hoping to get rich quick. Wild West-style murders, betrayal, execution, and power have led to numerous tales of the supernatural and ghostly encounters. Today, we'll look at a number of haunted locations throughout the Silver State. Welcome to the Ghosts of Nevada. Tonopah has a reputation for being a very haunted place. One evening in 1900, a prospector named Jim Butler lost his donkey. The animal had wandered off during the night and sought shelter near a rocky outcrop. When Butler discovered the animal sleeping the following morning, he picked up a rock to throw at the donkey in frustration, but noticed that the rock was unusually heavy. Butler had discovered an untapped reserve of silver ore. The site boomed, and Butler and others filed claims and began mining. In less than a year, the mines had already produced $750,000 in silver and gold, and during the peak years from 1901 until 1921, the total neared $121 million, earning Tonopah the nickname the Queen of the Silver Camps. Construction began on the Mizpah Hotel in 1905, shortly after the town of Tonopah was founded, and the hotel opened in 1907. It stands on many hundreds of miles of mine shafts. Until 1927, the Mizpah Hotel was the tallest building in the state. It towered proudly over the Tonopah Bank building, which also had offices on the first floor of the hotel, and a vault, which stands today in the lobby and is utilised as a small museum. The hotel was financed by several wealthy mine owners and businessmen who wanted five-star luxury to impress their guests and entertain politicians and future investors. Built at the cost of $200,000, the hotel was arguably Nevada's first luxury hotel. With impressive granite walls, leaded glass windows, solid oak furniture, hot and cold running water, and elegant stained glass skylights. It was one of the first hotels to have an electric elevator and quickly became a busy social hub for the booming mining town. The basement of the hotel is home to paranormal activity. It contains a large bank vault that used to store the entire payroll of the town's miners. This vault was believed to be impenetrable due to its thick, reinforced walls. However, it had a dirt floor. Within months of the hotel opening, 3 miners couldn't resist the challenge and managed to tunnel up via an old mining shaft through the floor and escaped with the entire payroll as well as a number of gold bars. But as they made their way along the tunnels with their ill-gotten gains, one of the robbers went rogue and killed the other 2 in the tunnel under the hotel, escaping with the money and gold for himself. He and the loot were never seen again, and his identity is still unknown. The ghosts of the murdered men are said to haunt the basement, giving cold chills and strange sensations to visitors and staff who happen to find themselves in there. People have heard disembodied shouting, dragging and scratching sounds, as though the men are frantically scrambling about. The ghosts of the miners are heard shuffling around, knocking and coughing, and the smell of tobacco smoke permeates the air. The apparitions are said to be mischievous and will play practical jokes on unsuspecting visitors, tripping people up or tapping their shoulders for fun whenever they are able. The third-floor rooms and corridors are haunted by the ghosts of 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. They have been seen and heard laughing and playing in this area, and guests report hearing their doors open and shut on their own. Paranormal investigators who have stayed at the hotel say the child spirits may be responsible for spikes on EMF meters during walks across the 3rd floor. A clairvoyant who stayed at the hotel in 2011 established contact with these youngsters and told the hotel's manager that the children didn't know one another and did not perish at the hotel. They appear rather happy in their spirit life, and it seems that they can visit the hotel as they wish. Sometimes guests become frustrated at the sounds of children racing through the corridors. They open their hotel room door to ask them to stop, but nobody is there. Stranger still, they will call the front desk to complain, only to learn that there are in fact no children staying in the building. The ghostly children may also cause other paranormal activity around the elevator. The doors of the hotel's old original elevator sometimes open and close at random, and it seems the buttons are pressed by unseen forces. Are the ghostly children responsible for such playful actions? The most famous ghost at the Mizpah is nicknamed the Lady in Red, and she is seen more than any other apparition in the hotel. She is seen throughout the building, but in particular on the 5th floor landing, outside rooms 502, 503 and 504, where it is thought she was murdered at some point in the 1920s. There are several versions of the story linked to this rather sad but well-known apparition. The location of her murder is unclear. Whether she was killed in her room or on the landing, we may never know. Her identity, as well as that of her killer, is also unknown. The first version of the story is that she was the kept woman of a married, wealthy businessman in town, and that she lived in the hotel whilst her lover ran his industry operations elsewhere in the state. Whilst he was away on business in Goldfield, she made money as a lady of the night, something she was prohibited from doing under their agreement. On one occasion, he missed the train and returned to the Mizpah early to find her with a client. Absolutely enraged, he murdered her in cold blood on the 5th floor landing. Other versions speculate that she was murdered by an angry client, possibly a rival businessman, but others say she died at the hands of her boyfriend, who was bitterly jealous of her line of work. Presently, her former room has been turned into a themed Lady in Red suite, decorated with opulent scarlet curtains, an elegant bed canopy, and beautiful dark oak furniture. Guests sometimes report seeing her apparition, and she appears to be rather affectionate. She has been known to physically hug and touch male visitors, and even run her fingers through their hair. Male travellers have heard her incorporeal voice whisper, "Hey, you," smelt her perfume, and witnessed objects move by themselves. But is she a gambler? In the basement is an old Keno machine which is unplugged, but every now and again it lights up, despite being disconnected from a source of electricity. Many people believe this is the work of the Lady in Red. Guests on the 5th floor have been puzzled to find individual pearls left on their pillows and dressing tables when they wake up. The pearls are supposedly from her necklace, which broke and spilled onto the floor during her brutal murder. Employees at the hotel believe the pearls are a calling card for the lady in red, indicating where she has recently been. Her pale face and telltale slim figure wearing a long red dress has also been seen out in the corridor, where she is known to disappear into walls, and sometimes she is seen in the elevator, especially with men who are on their own. For 150 years, the Nevada State Prison, located in Carson City, held some of the Silver State's most high-profile offenders. Its structures were built with sandstone extracted from the institution's own on-site quarry. This was a useful natural resource, and many of Carson City's most prestigious buildings, including the Capitol Building and the Carson City Mint, were constructed using sandstone mined out by prisoners. The prison was established in 1862 and closed permanently in 2012, with inmates being relocated. Nevada State Prison was also home to the only known penal casino in the United States, allowing prisoners to gamble brass currency at table games from 1932 to 1967. But this institution, like many other prisons, is still home to some lingering inmates. In the early 20th century, the prison became the sole designated facility for executions by the state of Nevada. Until the mid-1960s, this was Nevada's only prison, and therefore the only facility that could house maximum security or death row inmates. In total, 55 men were executed here, 10 hanged, 32 gassed, 11 through lethal injection, and 1 by firing squad. The first ever death by gas chamber in the United States took place here, with the execution of G. John on February the 8th, 1924, and the state's first death sentence by lethal injection occurred here in 1985. The last execution to take place in the state was in 2006. A member of the Hip Sing Tong Criminal Society from San Francisco, G. John was sentenced to death for the murder of Tom Kwong Ki, who was a member of a rival gang in the state of Nevada. G. John was executed in the early hours of February the 8th, 1924. The prisoner had refused food for 10 days, but agreed to have a last meal, consisting of ham, eggs, toast, and a cup of coffee. A guard transported the condemned prisoner to the gas chamber, and he was tied onto a metal seat while the cyanide was being prepared. He sobbed as he was strapped into the chair, until the captain of the guards told him to brace up. Around a dozen attendees, including journalists, medical specialists, and representatives of the US Army, served as witness to this execution through the observation window. Many of the onlookers smoked cigarettes whilst the execution was underway, believing that tobacco smoke would act as protection against vagrant gas fumes that might drift their way. A short time later, a group of 7 doctors pronounced him dead, but did not conduct an autopsy on the body because they feared that some of the remaining gas could be released. The last person to be executed with lethal gas was Jesse Bishop in 1979. After that, the chamber was adapted for lethal injection. The third-floor cell block and the execution chamber stand out as particularly notorious hotspots for paranormal activity. Visitors are sometimes overwhelmed with melancholy feelings, some complain of shortness of breath, and others feel a sense of dread, knowing numerous inmates died within this chamber. The apparition of Carole Cole also haunts the observation room, and he is particularly unpleasant to female members of staff and visitors. His full-bodied apparition has been seen inside the chamber many times, but on other occasions it is simply his ghastly face that floats above the execution bench. Cole was a serial killer who was executed here in 1985 for killing 2 women by strangulation. He was also convicted of murdering 3 other women in Texas and is believed to have killed up to 30 other people between 1947 and 1980. For his final meal, Cole ordered jumbo fried shrimp, French fries, salad with French dressing, and Boston clam chowder. The night before, he requested Kentucky Fried Chicken, but the guards could only give him chicken nuggets, as he was not allowed to have food with bones. Cole was the first inmate to be executed by lethal injection at Nevada State Prison on the 6th of December 1985 at 2:10 in the morning. His apparition is often seen as a reflection in the observation room window, standing next to those looking at the glass. Some believe that he is eternally trapped in this terrifying area, a place where his brutal, murderous ways were put to a permanent end in 1985. A prison shower room is said to be haunted by a murdered inmate. Former inmates corroborate the story, and many have seen and experienced various examples of paranormal activity attributed to the victim, including piercing screams and the water temperature becoming scalding hot for no reason. Eerie noises reverberate through the now empty cells, halls and corridors. Sudden knocks, abrupt whistling, loud bangs, cries for help and screams are often heard in close proximity to visitors. Heavy footsteps pace up and down corridors, and it is common for people to feel they are being followed. An unexplained figure has been seen peering in the window of a door that leads out to the prison yard. At least 5 prisoners were killed whilst out in the yard, 3 from lynching, 1 from a weapon attack, and 1 man was beaten to death in a fight. The mess hall and kitchen were considered to be the most dangerous area of the prison during its time as a facility. 2 African American prisoners were killed and 4 others wounded in a racially charged riot that broke out in the prison mess hall in October 1976. Nathan Kimmel was convicted of fatally stabbing one of the victims and trying to kill another. Kimmel died in 2018, aged 76, at the medical facility inside the maximum security prison in Carson City. He was serving a life term without the possibility of parole. Visitors and paranormal investigators have recorded unusual activity in the mess hall and kitchen. The sound of a man laughing menacingly and the echoes of metal pots and pans being moved on the stove of this now disused area can be somewhat alarming. People have been pushed and told by a disembodied voice to leave, causing great distress to some visitors. The Pioneer Saloon is located in the small town of Good Springs, roughly 25 miles from the south end of the Las Vegas Strip. This saloon stands isolated, a complete contrast to the glittering casinos and nightlife of Las Vegas, but it once served thousands of thirsty miners who enjoyed a cold beer or a shot served on its historic cherrywood bar. The Pioneer Saloon and the Good Springs Schoolhouse were both built in 1913 and are still in use to this day. Good Springs was once a prosperous town, but it saw significant decline, and the town's population was only 229 according to the 2010 census. Due to this, Good Springs is regarded as a ghost town. The town was named after cattle rancher and miner Joseph Good, whose cattle grazed in the southeastern foothills of the Spring Mountains. Mormon miners discovered lead at Potosi Mountain in the mid-1800s and gold was discovered in the region in 1893. Good Springs quickly became one of the most productive mining areas in Clark County, and over the years lead, silver, copper and zinc have all been mined from this area. Lead mining increased during World War I to produce ammunition. However, after World War I, mining declined and families moved away. World War II created a second demand for lead, but it too slowed after the war ended. The Pioneer Saloon was built by local businessman George Fail, and the walls of the saloon are formed out of stamped tin from the Sears Roebuck Company. But this is a bar with a checkered past and several interesting ghosts. A friendly apparition visits the saloon. His identity is unknown, but he is referred to as the miner. He is seen wearing old prospector's attire, Levi jeans, a crumpled cowboy hat, and dusty old work boots. He is not terribly tall and seems to enjoy sitting in the bar, watching people having a good time and absorbing the atmosphere of the saloon. He is thought to be a previous customer who returns to visit his favourite bar. We do know that more than one miner sadly perished in the mine shaft directly under the saloon. Another apparition is that of a previous landlord of the bar, who it is said was drinking at the bar when he collapsed and died very unexpectedly. Legend suggests that the bartender who was working a shift at the time of the death finished the landlord's glass of beer, smashed the glass and said, "Cheers to you," in the immediate aftermath. The ghost of a man named Paul Koski is said to haunt the saloon, and his apparition stems from an incident that happened on July the 3rd, 1915, only 2 years after the saloon had first opened. A group of miners were playing poker at a card table in the saloon. One of the gamblers, an out-of-work miner named Paul Koski, tried to cash out his winnings of just $10 and was accused by the dealer, Joe Armstrong, to be cheating. Paul Koski, in return, was convinced that Armstrong was dealing a crooked card game. Angry and insulted, Joe Armstrong pulled out a pistol and fired 6 shots in quick succession. Koski died immediately. 3 of the bullet holes can be seen in the wall of the Pioneer Saloon today, a chilling reminder of the lawlessness that was used to settle disputes in the past. Paul Koski is believed to be one of several ghosts that haunts the Pioneer Saloon. Before he manifests, the strong smell of old-fashioned cologne appears, even in areas of the saloon that are empty. Koski's ghost begins to appear, still wearing his blood-soaked clothes. He is sometimes seen at the poker table, still on display, where his life was taken, especially if people are hosting a card game. He glares at patrons angrily, but is always silent. Could the ghost of Koski be angry that Armstrong was acquitted of murder? A female voice is sometimes heard crying in the toilets late at night when no one is in there. An old-fashioned telephone on display mysteriously rings even though it is not plugged in. Long after the saloon is shut, cigarette and cigar smoke drifts through the air despite it being empty. Objects move around for no apparent reason. Perhaps one of the ghosts enjoys playing tricks on unsuspecting members of staff. Several movies have even filmed at the Pioneer Saloon, including Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, starring Johnny Depp, Miss Congeniality 2 with Sandra Bullock, and The Mexican, which starred Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts. But it seems one of the Pioneer Saloon's most interesting ghosts may well be a former star of the silver screen itself. In 1942, Carole Lombard, wife of film legend Clark Gable, was returning to Los Angeles from her home state of Indiana from a war bond rally with her mother and Clark Gable's press agent, Otto Winkler. The party had been scheduled to return to Los Angeles by train, but, eager to return home quickly, Lombard and 21 other passengers boarded TWA Flight 3 on January the 16th 1942. Shortly after the plane departed from Las Vegas, the seemingly ordinary flight met with a tragic end. The plane was unable to clear the peak of Mount Potosi by only 100 feet, ending the life of Carole Lombard and everybody on board. Lombard, aged just 33, her mother, Otto Winkler, the crew, and 15 military personnel perished in this tragic crash. Due to its proximity to the mountain, the Pioneer Saloon was utilised by journalists as a central rescue centre for a number of days after the crash. It was here that Clark Gable waited for Lombard's body to be retrieved from the wreckage, drinking heavily in an effort to numb his emotions. The remains of all 22 victims were brought here from the crash site. Today, the back room of the saloon features Gable and Lombard memorabilia, immortalising the lives of this famed Hollywood couple. Pieces of the plane wreckage are on display too, and many believe the female apparition crying in the toilets is indeed Carole Lombard. Could it be that her energy is attached to the pieces of the wreckage where her life was taken so unexpectedly in 1942? The cause of the crash was attributed to the flight crew's inability to properly navigate over the mountains surrounding Las Vegas. As a precaution against the possibility of enemy Japanese bomber aircraft coming into American airspace from the Pacific, safety beacons that would be utilised to direct night flights had been turned off, leaving the pilot and the crew of the TWA flight without visual warnings of the mountains in their flight path. Once Lombard's body was found, it was said that Gable took it with him for a proper burial at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, California, and that he was never seen at the Pioneer Saloon again. Her real name was Jane Alice Peters, and Carole Lombard was a studio-given name that she hated. Paranormal investigators have received positive audible responses when asking if Jane Alice Peters is present. The Pioneer Saloon is not just one of the state's oldest bars, it's possibly its most haunted. Nestled in the heart of Virginia City is the beautiful Mackay Mansion. Built in 1859 by George Hearst, a local mining tycoon, the Mackay Mansion Museum offers a fascinating journey back in time to the days of the gold rush. The museum is essentially an authentic Victorian-era time capsule, with its original furniture, carpet, wallpaper, intricate woodwork, and grand fireplaces. It has the city's first plumbed-in toilet, decorated lavishly with gold leaf, and it also holds a collection of antique dolls and artefacts. But beyond its rich history, the Mackay Mansion has some mysterious residents, some good, some malevolent. The mansion's first resident was a young George Hearst, father of William Randolph Hearst, who was the superintendent of the Gould and Curry Mining Company. Hearst would make the beginnings of his vast fortune in Virginia City and would become one of the West's most famous characters. George Hearst sold the property to John Mackay, an Irish-born industrialist, in 1871. Shortly after, John Mackay hit the Bonanza strike, one of the largest silver strikes in world history, making him easily one of the richest men in America. Mackay split the profits with his business partners, James Fair, James Flood, and William O'Brien. They became known as the Bonanza Kings, or the Silver Kings of Virginia City. The Big Four industrialists conducted all their mining business inside the Mackay Mansion mining office, while John Mackay lived with his family in the rest of the building. Mysterious figures of miners have been seen in the grounds surrounding the mansion. So realistic are these men that people think they are costumed actors. Before the building became the Mackay Mansion we see today, it was the head office of the Gould & Curry Mining Company. Directly across the street from the mansion is the Gould & Curry mine shaft, and in June 1887 there was a fire deep underground that claimed the lives of 11 men. Do these lost souls have a collective energy of some sort? Do the apparitions of these miners return to the mansion to demand answers from the company bosses about why they died on that fateful day? There is a sealed-up entrance to the very mine shaft where the fire took place, in the basement of the mansion. A man in a grey suit, thought to be Mr. Mackay, has been seen numerous times in the building. His apparition appears to be completely solid, walks with purpose, and he looks identical to his portrait on display in the parlour. A female apparition, believed to be Mrs. Mackay, has also been seen in the house. She wears a fine Victorian gown and is usually seen on the sofa in the living room or wandering through the second and third floors. Inside Mr. Mackay's office is a vault which was used to store the company's significant wealth in gold bars. The ghosts of 2 robbers killed by an armed guard who shot them both in the chest during a botched robbery attempt in 1883 are said to haunt the area near the Grand Safe. Is this why people feel chest pain and struggle to breathe in this area? The smell of masculine, unwashed bodies and the odour of blood can appear from nowhere, and electronic equipment frequently fails to operate in this area. The 3rd floor is said to be haunted by the ghosts of 2 little girls, Lily and Emma, who died in the house of an illness thought to be tuberculosis. Their footsteps and giggles are regularly heard racing up and down the stairs. One of the girls seems to be looking for her mother. Affectionate words such as kiss, hug, touch and mummy have been picked up in this bedroom on recording devices. Unseen, cold little hands tug at visitors' clothes. Blankets and bedclothes are constantly disturbed, then tidied, only to be found crumpled a short time later. A heavy wooden chair in the room has been known to physically turn around without any human intervention. Actor Johnny Depp stayed at the mansion whilst filming Dead Man in 1995. Depp reported being startled by the ghostly figure of a young girl dressed in white standing at the foot of his bed. But there are those who believe this may be something far more sinister, perhaps an evil entity masquerading as an innocent child to deceive unsuspecting visitors. The Mackay Mansion is also home to a dark, shape-shifting entity nicknamed the Shadow Man, who has been seen moving throughout the building. The apparition of Harriet, a young maid with meticulous attention to detail, is another visitor to the Mackay Mansion. When the house is in disarray or needs to be tidied, Harriet generally becomes more present. She appears wearing an old-fashioned uniform, and the smell of flowers can sometimes indicate her presence. Nobody is quite sure how she died, but some say she fell down an entire flight of stairs and her injuries proved fatal. Maybe she likes to return to keep the mansion neat and tidy to this day. She tends to haunt the parlour, the office, and the mansion's staircase. John Mackay died in 1902 at the age of 70 whilst on a business trip to London, but his former mansion remains a hub of paranormal activity in Virginia City, a place, it seems, full of ghosts. The Washoe Club is a historic saloon located on vibrant C Street in the Virginia City Historic District. This brick structure is believed to be one of the most haunted locations in the state. The building features a crypt, bar and museum dedicated to the mystery of the club. Some restless souls found here have been traumatised by their horrific unexpected deaths. Maybe their apparitions stay to find peace or remember the good times during Virginia City's glory days. The Washoe Club opened its doors for business on the 1st of June 1875, and according to reports in the press, applications for exclusive membership came in rapidly, earning it the nickname the Millionaires' Club. Similar gentlemen's clubs were already established in major cities like Boston, San Francisco and New York, and its allure as a high-end club for the rich was significant. It quickly became the meeting place for Virginia City's elite, the wealthy, where they could socialise and talk business, enjoy their status, and partake in all the numerous vices and perks of wealth behind closed doors. Most importantly, they did not have to associate with the everyday working man. But within less than 5 months, the extravagant club rooms were ravaged by the flames that destroyed much of Virginia City on October the 26th, 1875. The saloon was rebuilt and opened a second time later in 1876. By the mid-1870s, Virginia City was booming, and the most skilled miners, famous call girls, gunslingers, writers, performers and businessmen flocked to the Comstock Lode, hoping to strike it rich somehow. Whilst the first floor was the saloon, the upper 2 floors had fancy suites, a lavish pool room, a poker room and a parlour, decorated with marble, statues, walnut furniture and fine fabrics. The club's membership included wealthy people like John Mackay and other nationally significant members like former President Ulysses S. Grant, actor Edwin Booth, writer Mark Twain, and banker and railroad owner Darius Ogden Mills. The apparition of the lady in blue, dressed in a long, elegant blue dress with curled blonde hair, has been seen at the top of the club's spiral staircase. Some have nicknamed this spectre Lena and have identified her as a local call girl who was murdered in the building around 1890. Like a number of exclusive gentlemen's clubs, it is thought the club employed a number of resident girls to provide personal services for some of the members on the upper floors. Why she was murdered, nobody is sure, but it's possible that she suffered the fate experienced by many in this industry, being killed at the hands of a jealous client or boyfriend. Sometimes, when visitors take photographs of the staircase, mysterious blue mists and cobalt-coloured orbs can appear in the images. The smell of perfume and tobacco also drift down the stairs, even though the upper floors are empty. In the bar area, the mischievous spirit of an old prospector is said to be responsible for poltergeist activity. Bizarrely, full shot glasses of liquor become empty and fall to the floor, bar stools move and even fall over, and the saloon doors mysteriously swing open for ladies entering the bar. Perhaps this man enjoys the company of ladies and likes to make a good impression even to this day. So legendary is his thirst, the bar staff sometimes leave a bourbon shot on the bar at the end of the day, which is always empty by dawn. A somewhat shy apparition witnessed around the club is that of a young girl in a white dress who seems almost frightened of people who come to visit. Some visitors have reported being touched or grabbed by cold, invisible hands while ascending the spiral staircase, as if the young child is reaching out for a parent. The local legend is that in 1864, a 10-year-old girl named Gretchen was sadly struck by a horse-drawn carriage on the street just outside. Efforts were made to save her, but sadly her injuries proved fatal. In the club's early days, an explosion occurred in a nearby building, and 12 unfortunate souls lost their lives. Sadly, 2 residents on the 3rd floor of the old Washoe Club perished in the explosion, one of whom was an 8-year-old girl named Ella. Ella is thought to be the daughter of a call girl employed by the club. Ella seems to be very attached to the various dolls on display, and people report hearing a small child laughing. Perhaps Ella is responsible for playing with the rocking chair that is known to move by its own accord. The club's crypt has an interesting past. It served as Virginia City's overflow morgue to hold the bodies of the deceased in the winter months when the ground was frozen solid and digging graves was rendered impossible. Once the warmer spring weather arrived, the bodies were removed and laid to rest permanently. And in the harsh winter of 1874, nearly 80 corpses were held in this area. I hope you enjoyed this video from the Silver State, and my goodness, this was such an interesting video to make. I have already made 2 videos about Las Vegas in particular, one about the Luxor and one about the ghosts of the Las Vegas Strip. And there were so many comments to say you'd be interested in hearing more from the state, and that's why I made this video. For this video, I wanted to focus on locations outside of Las Vegas really, but there will be more to come from Las Vegas as a metropolitan area and even more from the state of Nevada, I think. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more from this region, and I really do want to cover more places like California, Arizona and the neighbouring states too. I've got a few stories for you today. We're going to dispel some myths, we're going to have a look at some gravestones, and then I've got a nice postcard to show you at the end. One of the things I really took away from this video is just how significant the mining industry was back in the day. Perhaps naively, I largely associated the mining boom with California, but in researching this video, it quickly became apparent that this was fundamental to shaping the state we see today, and the money involved was absolutely astronomical. If we just go back to John Mackay of the Mackay Mansion, I do think his story of rags to riches is fascinating. He was born in Dublin in 1831 and lived in absolute poverty. His family lived in a dirt floor hovel that they shared with a pig. I mean, that sounds bad, but in 1840 the family emigrated to America, to New York. In fact, they lived in the 5 Points slum. The 5 Points gained international notoriety as a densely populated, disease-ridden, crime-infested slum which existed for over 70 years. But the residents there worked hard, but their wages were so low. They had appalling sanitation and what can only be described as fire trap tenements. The outbreaks of cholera, measles, diphtheria and typhus struck hardest at children and infants. Incidentally, the film The Gangs of New York is set in the 5 Points slum and depicts the turf wars, I suppose, of the slum at that time. Things got worse when John Mackay's father died, leaving him to be the sole breadwinner for his mother and young sister. He became a newsboy and was later apprenticed to be a ship's carpenter and made enough to feed the family. But in 1848, the news came of the California gold rush, but Mackay couldn't leave his family until his sister was old enough to be able to work. By 1851 he was able to go, and Mackay, at the age of 19, journeyed across America to California where gold fever had really struck. There is a book about John Mackay called The Bonanza King by Gregory Crouch, and I'm just going to quote from this. He wrote, "Gold mining was hard, dirty and repetitive, like digging an endless ditch. Success or failure depended on life's luck of the draw. A man could easily dig the entire season and finish poorer than when he started." After 7 years of backbreaking digging and panning, Mackay had less money than he had arrived with. But Mackay was a determined man, and in 1859 he and a fellow Irishman, both completely broke, walked 100 miles to Virginia City, where there was word of a big gold and silver find called the Comstock Lode. There he worked as a miner for $4 a day, and Mackay worked for one of the many bigger consortiums that were mining the area. And his plan was to make enough money and gain expertise to start out on his own. So with the wages he was supporting his family, supporting himself, and putting away some money for future investments. His big break came in 1865 when his luck immediately turned. He had bought a share in the Kentuck mine, which yielded $1.6 million in gold to the partners. At 35, Mackay was a rich man. In 1875, he and a group of Irish friends that I mentioned bought a claim 1,000 feet below the Nevada desert and struck the biggest silver deposit ever found anywhere in the world. It was worth $545 billion when it eventually petered out, and it was called the Big Bonanza. Mackay went from earning $4 a day to making $450,000 a month. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. But this huge success financially barely changed Mackay, and he still drove a one-pony trap. He loved corned beef and cabbage, and a big night out for him was to go and see a play. He and his partners started the Hibernia Bank, which insisted on a fair deal for miners in terms of interest rates. Mackay took on the rather hated industrialist Jay Gould, who charged extortionate rates for people to use his underwater cable to Ireland from the United States. Mackay and his friend and business partner set up the Commercial Cable Company, and the company laid 2 transatlantic cables and forced the toll rate for transatlantic messages down to 25 cents a word. He and his wife travelled, and they really enjoyed Paris, where they had a house. Mackay died of heart failure in London in 1902, and at that time he was going into business to create a transatlantic telephone cable, but he didn't live to see this completed, and my understanding is that his son picked up the mantle on this one. Mackay was famous for fair dealings with his employees, and as a philanthropist he gave generously, especially to the charities of the Roman Catholic Church, and he particularly gave to a Catholic orphan asylum in Virginia City. And in June 1908, the Mackay School of Mines building was presented to the University of Nevada as a memorial to him by his widow and his son Clarence. A statue of John Mackay stands outside of the Mackay Mines building on the university campus in Reno. This was a person who wasn't afraid of hard work and really felt for the plight of the miners, especially those who'd had a similar journey to him from Ireland. He was worth $1 billion when he died, and various sources suggest that that could be somewhere near to $80 billion today. If we just go back to the Mizpah Hotel for a moment, there are some myths related to this hotel that we need to dispel. Myth number 1 is that Wyatt Earp kept the saloon. That is not true because he had left Tonopah for Los Angeles and was prospecting along the Colorado River before the Mizpah was built. Myth number 2 is that Jack Dempsey, the heavyweight boxer, was a bouncer or doorman at the hotel. But in his 1960 autobiography, he wrote, "I never was a saloon bouncer in my life." So despite Dempsey having several professional fights within the state, including in Tonopah, it is unlikely that he ever had an association with the Mizpah. Myth number 3 is that Howard Hughes married actress Jean Peters in the Mizpah. This is not true. They were married in Tonopah, but they actually were married in his room in the now demolished L&L Motel in a 5-minute ceremony with only his aide as a witness and a justice of the peace who performed the ceremony. And the final myth is that longtime Democratic Senator Key Pittman had died in the hotel just before the 1940 general election, and that his body was put in a bath filled with ice until the result of the election was announced. This was so that Governor Edward Carville could appoint a replacement. This is not true, as he did have a severe heart attack just a few days before the election. Whether this happened at the hotel is unclear, but he died a few days later in a hospital in Reno. Despite this, the hotel does have an eating establishment named the Pittman Cafe, and it also has a Jack Dempsey room for evening meals. I just thought we'd have a look at some of the graves at Old Tonopah Cemetery. This cemetery began in 1901, and by 1911 it had 300 graves, and it was only a tiny plot. And many of the residents as such were miners who had died rather tragically, but there are some other interesting folks. Bina Veralt was born in Wisconsin, but she moved to New York City, and there she and her friend, Isella Brown, created a love syndicate. The women claimed to be wealthy widows and would seduce rich men into giving them expensive gifts and money. One man fell in love with Bina, but he became suspicious when she refused his attentions and did not return his gifts. And at that point he went to the authorities. Bina was arrested. It was estimated that the two women collected about $100,000 in fine clothing, jewellery and money, which, according to the cemetery's website, in today's dollars is about $2.5 million. During the trial, Bina pawned some diamond rings, but ultimately she fled and went on the run. About a year later, she found herself in Tonopah and she died of alcoholism in 1907, aged 32. But there is a ghost story connected to her. Apparently, she haunts the Tonopah Historic Mining Park Visitors Centre. I don't know why, but apparently she does, and people walking up the hill to this centre have seen her looking out of the windows. Both visitors and employees have heard voices and caught strange things on camera in several of the buildings on the premises. And then we have George Devil Davis, who was the first African American in Tonopah. He was known for being a joker and a prankster, and was beloved by the entire community regardless of his race. George worked hard and eventually he became a political leader of an African American community and came to own his own saloon, which he named the Eureka. However, George had a dark, reckless side, and witnesses said that George was an abusive husband. On the night of June the 22nd, 1907, his wife Ruth came into the Eureka saloon and fired 5 shots, hitting George in the back. She continued to fire as he went down, and according to newspapers, she said, "I told you I would get you." Ruth only served 1 year for his killing because of the extensive abuse he'd inflicted on her. His ghost is said to haunt the Tonopah Liquor Company, and he plays pranks and is believed to be responsible for poltergeist activity. Whether or not this was the Eureka bar where he was shot, I'm not sure. It could be. But there is also another apparition there too, the ghost of a lady of the night named Hattie, who is very kind and very maternal and loves to interact with children. And finally, I felt it was only right to include the grave of William Big Bill Murphy, who is Tonopah's local hero, because of his courageous actions during the Belmont Mine fire. On February the 23rd, 1911, 17 miners were killed when workings at the 1,100-foot level of the Belmont mine caught fire. Bill went down in the mine cage a number of times to rescue stricken miners. On the last trip, Big Bill said, "Well, boys, I have made 2 trips and I am nearly all in, but I will try again." And sadly, he never returned and he perished in the fire. A statue honouring Big Bill can be seen in front of the post office on Main Street. There is also a mural depicting the funeral procession, which took place during a blizzard. I'm not aware of any ghost stories connected to him, but there are certainly stories of ghosts in various other mines in the state. And I just have one postcard for you today, which is from Virginia City and is from 1995. Dear Enid and Jack, we had a lovely flight over. Nita has the most gorgeous home, been to Reno for 3 days, met all the family. Dee's daughter Sylvia and her husband drove 450 miles to come and see us, a lovely crowd. Went to Virginia City yesterday, a lovely drive all around the mountains. Virginia City is the same to look at as it was in the 1800s, going to Lake Tahoe today. Hope Jack is okay. Love, Arthur and Nora, I think that is, and that went to Penzance. Well, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to come and find me on my Instagram. And take care, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.